Just fucking do it. Subscribe now.
I believe out of the big movies that Pixar had, their net average was about 537.8 million.
Your average?
Yes, and that's both national and international. And Disney, their average for national and international was 270 million. And they had more movies. Pixar had less movies and they made more. And that was because of the technology.
Right.
But they sold part of the technology, correct? They had 3 main technologies, and one of them they sold it for the Jurassic Park movie.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. That was so RenderMan, Marionette, and Ringmaster were the 3 technologies.
Yeah.
So RenderMan is the one that really made them like 20 Academy Awards.
And that's the one they sold off?
No, they sold off. I hadn't read to where they sold it off actually.
But altogether, Steve Jobs, I believe he wanted 100% control.
He bought that for $10 million
Yeah.
initially.
He had to float it though for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he dumped 50 million into
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
first 5 years.
And when they were negotiating with Disney, I believe he did want 100% control of Pixar, correct? To start off. And that's just his nature, his personality. So they had to come to make a deal. You know, what would be the terms? I think they fought back and forth to see if they could work a deal out. Eventually, he wanted to leave. He did the takeaway method, and then he said, you know, I'll go to another company. Like, who was the other company? Like, I'll go to Fox or Warner Brothers. So the Disney executives, I think they ousted, what's his name?
Katzenbach.
Yeah, just because of that argument.
Well, also Katzenbach, after he had he had a successful movie, I forget which it was, he wanted to have more recognition, he wanted to make more money, he wanted to have a bigger piece of the pie. And but they had already, I believe they had already started talking to Pixar, and they knew that was going to happen if Jobs joined the management team. So he got ousted. And then Eisner was left in charge, and I believe that facilitated the deal. Now, I don't know if Katzenbach was against the deal. I don't know that. But I just know, in one of the teaching points I just gave the other group, is that egos play a huge role in these big deals. Okay? I mean, whether it's a great deal or not a great deal for the shareholders that they're supposed to be looking out for, is depend on, you know, how much their individual egos are massaged. And as one of you just pointed out a minute ago, Steve always wanted to be in control, or as close to 100% control. And he wanted to control the technical, the animation, the whole thing. Because that's how he believed that he was, not believe, but how he proved himself successful at Apple all those years. And then another teaching point is, of course, Mark Lewis, who threw him out of Apple, was the same private equity guy that put up the 84 grand to buy a third 20 years before. Same exact guy, okay?
You got some history there.
Yeah. And of course, then when they brought Steve back to Apple, it was that same guy that had to eat crow that had put up the money, then thrown him out, and then asked him to come back, which he apparently took great solace in. I'm sure any of us would. See, forecast.
I think we need to get a better understanding of the products and services, so we can also mention something about the forecast.
Yeah, the
and
future
we can
cash
also
flows.
do the valuation. At least I think that's the core of the valuation, and the rest all basically are additional factors influencing the base valuation.
And another teaching point, which is this is a stock deal. So even though it wasn't a seller finance, it was a seller finance.
Yeah, stop.
Yeah, it was stock.
Not cash, all right.
Yeah, not $1 changed hands. And for this big a deal, that's huge. That's huge.
It's a tough one.
Not in my opinion. I think there's so much benefit. You know, just years and years of
But
film.
see, the other teaching point, and tomorrow when we're going through, is your deals are no different except there's more zeros on this.
Right.
But if it doesn't get past the motivated seller, and the Pixar deal, somebody was motivated, okay? And it was seller finance at the end of the day, because it was all stock. Your deals are not dissimilar, it's just the zeros. Doing a $5 million deal is harder actually than a $50 million, which is harder than a $500 million deal, because they would, if you have commercial debt in it whatsoever, they would rather put a bunch of work and get $500 million out the door as opposed to $3.5 million out the door. And when you understand that, and when you understand that money's just a commodity, and that you can, you know, suck it out of them in a reputable way, and when you the shift of balance, or the balance shift, and this doesn't happen by serendipity. You guys are in the stage of having an epiphany, either early stage epiphany, like early stage Alzheimer's or late stage Alzheimer's. That's either early stage epiphany, that there's a whole different world. And then once you get over that, even though you've heard for 30, 40 years that that's horseshit, now you know, and you've heard people in here, not the least of which, and then when you were going through the regular seminar, and you were able to, you know, to hear Roberto in the flesh say how he's done this, and Anelli before him, and of course Jason.
Marcus.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, they can do it. Then you can do it. But this, just take the zeros off, and these are the deals that you guys are looking at and doing. I'm not saying you don't have to do, or you can't do big deals, but there's a lot of bells and whistles here. There's a lot of things that had to be come to fruition, and Jobs was motivated. If Jobs hadn't been motivated, if I remember correctly, he had 100% of the stock.
Yeah.
I mean, if you couldn't sell him, and the reason that he went to Disney, as I recall, because he threatened to go to Fox, he threatened to go to the other, he'd never gone to Fox, but I mean, he threatened to go to these other people like Warner Brothers he could have gone to, is the fact that Steve sold the shit out of it. He sold the powers that be at Disney.
At this point, he only had 50% left. I think it says in 1995, after one of their big hits, they did their first IPO and he sold off half.
Okay, well, he still was a controlling shareholder.
Exactly, yeah.
He was still the controlling shareholder, so he sold the hell out of it to convince them, because bringing Steve Jobs into your company is, I mean, either you're shortlisted to get thrown out yourself,
Right.
because of his track record. But he was a driving force. He was a driving force, and these guys, contrary to how you think they talk very not dissimilar to myself, and they're aggressive, whether they're an introvert or not. And one of the things, and they all act as if they have no limits to their abilities. They all act with great enthusiasm, except in this particular transaction, Steve, his enthusiasm overwhelmed him, and his success, because he was promising and delivering on that part, that he could make Pixar as successful as Apple was, or at least down that road. But he really wanted to get back to Apple, and eventually they asked him, but it wasn't too long. So So, but egos are involved in these deals. And in one form or another, there's always a motivated seller. Whether the seller is more motivated than the buyer is, you know, and you want to be less motivated in our group than the seller. You want them to, you know, bend over backwards. You want them out. You want them spitting up blood. And then you're going to give them a solution. You're going to help them out. And that's how it works. And it has been working out like this. But I mean, deals like this have been, you know, 100 years ago. And dating back to Carnegie back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. I mean, and again, he didn't like equity because equity would reduce his ownership. And he wanted control. He was a control freak. Like a lot of these guys are. Steve Jobs for sure was a control freak.